Hi, hello, I'm here. Sober, obviously. To segue into the background of how this video came to be. A couple of weeks ago, I had a game night with my friends where we played Overwatch 2. Yes, I know, this is my coming out video. I am a gamer. I realize it might take some time for you to reconcile with this fact, and even longer to forgive me, but hopefully the fact that I suck ass at this game is enough to bridge the gap. The point is, my friends and I have this kind of get-together every so often where we play Overwatch and drink shots in between rounds. It's fun, it's unhinged, but most importantly, it's chaotic. And I always rank down to borderline bronze. That's, actually really embarrassing. Because I play on PlayStation 2, which is categorically easier than PC. This time, however, I sent voice messages to all of my poor, unsuspecting friends after the session, a portion of which centered around the K-pop survival show that I had just finished watching at the time, Island 2. Playing these back, I realized pretty soon that this could make an interesting video. And so, I will be allowing my drunken rant to lead the discussion wherever it may go, while I, sober as I am, supplement needed context or expound where necessary about things I talk about. Now, if any of you think I will be nearly as polished or poignant as I usually am, let me set the tone for the video right now.
I'm not even gonna lie to you right now. I might piss my pants. I'm at that point. But it's okay, we vibe.
To provide context for those who have no idea what I'm even talking about, Izna is an upcoming 7-member girl group under Wake 1, formed through the Mnet survival show Island 2. The group is a joint project between Wake 1 and The Black Label, and they are slated to debut by the end of 2024. During the finale, 7 contestants were selected to form Izna, based on fan votes and producer choices. And by producers, I do mean the judges of the show, and not the actual producers. Confusing, I know, but just run with it. The 5 members chosen by fans were Choi Jungin, Bang Jimin, Yoon Ji-yoon, Coco, and Roo Sarang, while Mai and Jung Se-bi were selected by producers. That being said, I'm going to let Mrs. Genius over here take the lead from here on out.
So I guess the first place I really want to start out with is the judges of the survival show. I could not imagine a more useless group of people in my entire lives. I'm gonna be honest, at this point, the only one I really recall is Taeyong. And Taeyong just... what the fuck is this man? What is wrong with him? Not in, his personality or his appearance or whatever, but I guess it is his appearance. Because I think he looks so much like... he's a carrot. That man is a carrot. Oh my god. The entire time I was watching him, I was like, oh my god, look how orange he is. He's a fucking carrot. He reminds me of Trump. Sorry, no, that was so out of pocket. That's so rude. That doesn't change the fact that he is absolutely a fucking orange. No, a carrot. Oh my god. I'm sorry, no, that sounded like a Cali girl almost. Future me, I'm so sorry that you have to deal with it. Anyway, back on my original point, I think the judges are absolutely useless the entire season. I don't think that's unique to me whatsoever. I think a lot of people have shared the same opinion that, what the fuck were they even doing throughout the entire show? I could point to specific, examples right now, but honestly, my brain isn't in that mind state to do so.
And now that I have all my brain cells intact, let's talk about some examples. Multiple times, there would be a trainee struggling with a certain aspect of performing, and the only response, if you weren't favored, was just simply to improve, as vague as that is. And while she eventually fell out of the graces of fans for other reasons we'll get to, Soojung is a more obvious example of this phenomenon. She was a standout dancer with a background that clearly gave her an edge in choreography. But like many contestants who specialize in one area, her skills in other performance aspects were not as polished. During the Black Maid test, where contestants were divided up by producers into 3 groups of 4, and each group was automatically given a song to cover, Soojung's group received I Am the Best by 21. When the group had their midpoint check, for those that don't know, basically a chance to show the judges what they accomplished and where to improve before the official stage and rating, the judges, instead of offering clear advice on how to elevate her performance, their feedback to Soojung was to conceive her own style, warning her not to copy 21 too closely. Now, on the surface, this may seem like reasonable advice. They didn't want her to invite direct comparisons that could lead to criticism if she failed to live up to 21's high standard. But in reality, this type of advice felt shallow and neglectful. Trainees performing covers are always going to be compared to the original artists. That's the entire nature of doing a cover song. It's part of the challenge to see if they can pull off the concept and song difficulty. Rather than giving her the tools to tweak and refine her delivery, how to blend her own flair while still respecting the original's iconic energy, the judges left Soojung with abstract advice. Telling a trainee to essentially not be compared to 21 when covering one of their biggest hits feels like an impossible feat without some guidance. In a survival show format, the purpose of mentorship is to help these trainees grow and adapt to the high standards of the industry, not just to point out what they're doing wrong without providing a clear path to improvement. Now, I'm not saying the judges should have simply handed Soojung the answer. That would have just led to her copying their vision of the performance, which defeats the purpose of her creating her own unique interpretation. But they could have at least provided her with a starting point. Picture the situation like a math class. A student is struggling with a problem and has no idea where to even begin. If the teacher's only response is to just solve it, that's not helpful. Like, yeah, no shit. The student knows they're supposed to solve it, but without knowing which formula to use, or even what the final solution is supposed to look like, how are they expected to succeed? In Soojung's case, the judge's feedback was the equivalent of that. Sure, telling her to create her own style instead of mimicking 21 was understandable, but how was she supposed to go about that? What kind of stage presence should she aim for? How could she build her confidence in a way that still paid homage to the original song while highlighting her own strengths as a performer? These are the kinds of questions the judges could have helped her explore, giving her a base to work off of rather than leaving her in the dark. Now, let's look at the other end of the spectrum. How the judges respond when their favorites struggled with performance issues. Take Mai's vocals as an example. Now, before her fans come for my neck, let me preface this by saying I bear no ill will towards the girl. This is not going to be a hate parade, but it's also not illegal to point out the very obvious vocal issues she faced during the show. From the auditions, it was clear that Mai's singing had a distinctly nasal quality, which made her sound bad, for lack of a better word. Nasality, when it comes to singing, isn't something you are born with. It usually stems from improper vocal technique. While the judges did take note of it, it wasn't treated as a major issue until later in the competition, when eliminations thinned the group and each contestant had more lines to sing. That's where her vocal deficiencies became impossible to ignore. Now, here's where the judges' reactions gets interesting. When it finally became necessary to address Mai's vocal struggles, they did exactly what they should have done. They gave her practical advice. Producer 24, one of the show's judges, was seen coaching her on how to correct the incorrect form that was causing her nasal tone. By the time of the official performance, her nasality wasn't completely gone, but there was a noticeable improvement. Meanwhile, let's not forget that Mai was on the same team as Soojung during this time. The difference in how they were treated by the judges is glaring. While Soojung was left with vague, unhelpful advice about finding her own style, Mai was given specific feedback and actionable steps to improve. The contrast between the guidance they received highlights the clear discrepancies in how the judges handled different contestants. Favorites like Mai were given their own tools to succeed, while others, like Soojung, were left to figure it out on their own.
Also, oh my god, can we talk about Bang Jimin, like the edit that she got? Now, I'm not even going to pretend that I know, even in the slightest amount, what kind of edit she got in RU Next, or am I trying to claim that I actually watched RU Next? I didn't. But Bang Jimin was in that show, and now she came to Island 2. And I think even from the very beginning, even the most generous of like commentators on this whole situation were like guaranteeing that she would have been in the final lineup. I think it's a very common storyline for like previously, idols who were in survival shows to end up in the survival show like sequentially after. Of course, that didn't end up for one of the contestants, but we'll talk about that later.
I, in fact, did not end up talking about that later. So let's address the edits now, starting with Bang Jimin. I firmly believe that she was both a producer favorite, and by that I mean the actual producers, and a fan favorite, largely due to her previous appearance on Are You Next?, another survival show. Her screen time on Island 2 was practically unmatched, perhaps only rivaled by Yoon. Every victory, every obstacle, and every conflict seemed to position Jimin in a favorable light. So, when the final lineup came around, her placement as second place didn't surprise me at all. In fact, the only shock was that she wasn't first place. As for Fuko, as I alluded to before, who also had prior survival show experience on Girls Planet 999, her journey played out a little differently. Despite her initial positive edit, the tone shifted drastically in the second half of the show once she began expressing doubts. The editing team seemed to amplify her insecurities, making them more central to her narrative than her herself. I wouldn't go as far to say that her edit is solely responsible for her not making it to the final lineup. I'm not entirely sure that's the case, but the correlation is hard to ignore. For me, anyway. However, there's one contestant I'm certain suffered greatly from the editing team. This brings us back to Soojung. In the same challenge with Mai, Soojung was shown discussing Mai's vocal struggles behind her back with members of other groups. Soojung explained that she actually knew how to help Mai improve, but intentionally withheld that assistance because it would mean helping her competition. To make matters worse, she laughed about it. The audience was quick to label Soojung a mean girl after this aired, and the backlash was harsh. The situation was made even more damaging when compared to Yoon, who had been present during this conversation. Instead of staying silent, Jiyoon chose to leave the room and went straight to Mai, who was practicing her vocals. She then proceeded to help her try to straighten out her nasality. I know this might be an unpopular take, but I don't actually think Soojung did the wrong thing in that situation. Bold, I know, but hear me out. I don't see an issue with her not wanting to help someone who poses a direct threat to her ability to debut. At the time, only 6 spots were guaranteed, and Mai had a lot of popularity. Helping her improve could very well have cost Soojung her own place in the lineup. I mean, it did anyway, but that's besides the point. Where Soojung went wrong, though, was giggling about Mai's inadequacies behind her back. And worse, doing so in front of the other groups? If she had just stuck to her decision and kept quiet, I frankly couldn't fault the girl. It would be another situation if Soojung was actively sabotaging Mai, but omission of information is par for the course. I think people forget that survival shows are designed to be cutthroat competitions. The fight for screen time, more lines, and better stage positions is intense because that's how you guarantee exposure to the audience and boost your chances of debuting. Every little advantage matters, so it's natural for contestants to be strategic like that. When you're in a situation where only a few spots are available, helping someone else, especially in a popularity contest, can easily cost you your own chance. But again, it's still a bitch move to brag about not helping somebody. So the edit in this case was more so about the show exposing what was happening behind the scenes. So basically, Soojung just made their job easier. I'm sure they were thankful for that. But I know many will disagree with me, for the simple fact that these contestants will be a part of the same group eventually, so fostering a competitive mindset could hurt those future group dynamics. Building trust and cooperation early on would, in theory, create a more harmonious team once the show is over. Cultivating strong, supportive relationships could lead to better teamwork when they debut, which is crucial for a long-term success as a group. However, while that is a valid concern, it doesn't change the fundamental reality of survival shows. The format is designed to reward individual success, not group cohesion. Contestants who prioritize others over themselves often don't make it to the final lineup. We've seen countless examples of trainees who didn't put themselves first and were eliminated as a result. So while a pleasant group dynamic is important, it's irrelevant if you don't debut in the first place. The brutal truth is, you have to look out for yourself if you want to make it to the end of the competition. Now, I'm not saying they need to go on a rampage and make enemies out of everyone, but you do well to remind yourself that while civility is important, winning is the end goal.
I think that in the survival show in the general populace is meant to represent as a popularity contest, right? A lot of the contestants who end up in the final lineup aren't necessarily the most talented, right? I think that's very obvious when you count the fact that Mai even entered the lineup, which let me get this straight. I'm not even trying to like jump up on the hate train that's on her right now. I guarantee you that is not what my objective is whatsoever. But like, if you compare her to like even the other contestants that were like against her in that round, there is no reason why she should have gotten into the final lineup if it was really based on talent. The main thing that I want to get across right now is that survival shows are based on popularity, not on talent, and that is kind of a thing that I trip over, even myself. I know a lot of people trip over. They're like, why isn't this really talented person getting into the final lineup? Why are they like being so low in the ranks? And I have to, again, pronounce myself. I have to remind myself that this is not a talent contest. Like, most reality shows aren't. Like, I think that might be a controversial statement. Not in the sense that, like, most people don't recognize it as such, but just that most people don't want to acknowledge that, like, let's say you were supporting an idol who was very popular, who got into the final lineup, and you think that it's based on skill, but most people are telling you it's actually based on the fact that they were really popular, whether it's for their personality or, whatever else ended up them in the final lineup. I'm sorry to tell you, but like, it has little to do with their talent. I don't even think that's the case in the West, right? Like, we have America's Got Talent, The Voice, etc., etc. I think a lot of people want to assign people's success to talent, but that is very rarely ever the case.
Now, I know it seems like I just rambled off a bunch of nonsense, so let me bring it back to earth. People watching the survival show would be forgiven for thinking that talent was the biggest contributing factor to a trainee debuting. I mean, there are audition segments where the trainees are rated by the judges off the bat, whether or not they have what it takes. The trainees are constantly given advice on how to improve their skills, and the show even divides the contestants up based on their perceived talent. But the very function that places the trainees in the limelight and allows them to debut isn't their final scores by the judges, but fan votes, an element that hinges not on skill, but the ability to grab and hold the audience's attention. A far more important trait to have, in the producer's opinion anyway. Sure, the premise is that the most talented trainees will debut, but we've seen time and time again that is not the case. Being a great vocalist or superior to others in dancing doesn't always secure a spot. In fact, it almost never does. These shows are designed to hook the audience emotionally, which means that contestants with compelling stories, strong personalities, or just good editing tend to fare better than those who are purely talented. Some might argue that talent is what gives a contestant popularity, and sure, there's some truth to that, but it's only slightly correct. Talent definitely plays a role. I don't want to make it seem like it's totally irrelevant. But it's not enough on its own. It's not just about hitting high notes or nailing choreography. It's about someone who can capture the audience's hearts. Popularity becomes the deciding factor more often than not, and contestants who connect with viewers or have a viral moment end up with better odds of debuting. Choi Jung-in is a prime example of how talent alone doesn't guarantee popularity or high rankings in survival shows. Despite finishing in first place, her journey throughout the show had her consistently ranking in the bottom half after most challenges. These rankings were based on both the live audience's opinions and judges' scores. Sure, you could argue that maybe she had a bad day, or the audience on certain performance days just happened to lean towards other contestants. However, this wasn't an isolated incident. It happened repeatedly. What's wild is that Jung-in was widely considered as one of the most talented trainees. Whether it was singing, dancing, or commanding the stage with her presence, she was undeniably strong. Yet her low rankings suggest that talent alone didn't translate into fan votes. What kept her afloat, and what likely helped her secure the first place finish, was the show's consistent focus on her. The producers clearly favored her. The actual producers, again, giving her more screen time than even some contestants who were ranking higher or showing significant improvement. It's a clear example of how crucial that extra push from the show's producers can be, and how talent isn't always the driving factor in these competitions. Now, while she had a happy ending, she easily could have fell to the wayside if the producers of the show hadn't allowed it, by turning her tribulations into an underdog story. Before moving on, I would like to take a moment to talk about Mai again. Ever since the show ended, a lot of people have complained about how she managed to secure a spot in the final lineup despite what they saw as a lack of skill. Many claim she just wasn't talented enough to debut. And I'd argue these complaints are coming from people who still hold on to that misconception about survival shows being talent contests. Whether people like it or not, Mai was incredibly popular for her dancing, her stage presence, and her visuals. She might not have been the strongest singer, honestly, probably one of the weakest, but her work ethic and ability to command attention on stage were exactly what the show prioritized. And honestly, this isn't unique to Mai. It applies to plenty of contestants who viewers felt were undeserving. The show ultimately favors those who fit its mold, and in Mai's case, her strengths aligned perfectly with what the producers and the audience were looking for. It's not fair to blame Mai for working within the system and standing out in ways that mattered to those in control of the outcome. In fact, she demonstrated a keen awareness of what the competition really valued, and in the end, that's exactly why she earned her spot in the final lineup. And I'm saying this as someone who didn't even vote for her during the show. Honestly, how do I keep getting into these scenarios where I'm defending people that I don't even necessarily support myself?
Now, one thing that is kind of impossible to not bring up when it comes to Island 2 is the entire storyline that kind of sustained the whole show, which is the quote-unquote rivalry, the competition between Jiyoon and Jungin, right? Now I'm gonna start out with this by saying I am a Jiyoon defender, right? You might call her number 5 defender, number 5. I don't want to say number 1 because that's a little bit too much commitment to this random idol that I don't know, but I feel like number 5 is a sweet spot. Anyway, I like Jiyoon. I think the stars are in the skies. Do they belong? Now, I don't necessarily know if this is an unpopular opinion, okay, but I was very much on Jihoon's side when it came to this whole debacle. And now when I say that, I don't want to make it seem like I was not cognizant of what Junghoon was going through. I absolutely was. And I think even saying that I was on Jihoon's side makes it skew towards a side that I don't even necessarily mean. The core of what I'm getting at is that I think the two of them had major miscommunication issues, and I think a big factor of the show, a big upside, was actually seeing them resolve this miscommunication. Because I think the ideal space that I want a future K-pop group to be in is not to avoid confrontation whatsoever, right? I don't think that's healthy. That's just gonna lead to resentment. No. I want them to actually, get into some kind of altercation and actually resolve that so I can see the skills that they have when they deploy that kind of skill. And they were absolutely able to do that. Now, I am also of the volition that the Mnet editing enhanced this whole situation to be much bigger than it actually was, right? I remember even that initial, opening that they had when Jihoon finally came back to Island after leaving ground, and she was being spoken to by Jungin and she supposedly ignored her. I feel like that could easily be chalked up to the fact that she just didn't hear Jungin since everything was quite loud at the time. But yeah, I think a whole lot of this could be just chalked up to miscommunication, because I think Jihoon expected a level of loyalty from Jungin when it came to voting from her that was not really reciprocated, right? Now, I don't necessarily know if Jihoon voted for Jungin, but she did apparently expect that Jungin would vote for her, so it makes me think she voted for Jungin. But they were really dragging out the storyline, right? Because I'm gonna be honest, there was very little about the show that was even appealing in the first place. So they really needed to capitalize on this minimal amount of drama that they themselves weren't even able to, grind out to, I guess is the verbiage that I would use. But yeah, I'm glad to see the resolution between the two girls. I don't want to see them fighting each other in any sense of way.
You know what? I'm surprised by how much of that made sense. At least to those who are more familiar with the show. For those that aren't, what I'm talking about in this section is basically the survival show version of We Were on a Break!
We were on a break!
And if you don't know that reference, oh god, I'm at that age where people might not know this. Ugh. Much like the Jiyoon and Jungin conflict on Island 2, Ross and Rachel had a serious miscommunication issue during an episode on the sitcom Friends that was so polarizing, it spawned an entire conversation about relationship boundaries that transcended the show itself. The Island 2 conflict originated during the division of the contestants into two groups, the Islanders and the Grounders. These groups were separated based on their ranks, with different levels of resources, accommodations, and opportunities provided to each group. The problem began after an audition segment, when more girls were assigned to Island than there were available spots. To rectify this, the show implemented a voting system where the girls had to vote for who they wanted to stay in Island, rather than voting contestants out. Jiyoon received only one vote, likely her own, while Jungin secured enough votes to remain in Island. This led to Jiyoon feeling hurt, seemingly because she thought her relationship with Jungin was closer, and Jungin should have supported her. Jungin, on the other hand, believed that Jiyoon would have gotten enough votes without hers, and opted to vote for those she thought weren't so sure to get in. This resulted in the two being separated, with Jiyoon bearing a lot of resentment. A few challenges later, after Jiyoon finally earned her way back into Island, she returned to find Jungin waiting for her. Their reunion was tense, at least according to Mnet's editing. If you look at the play-by-play, Jiyoon was busy reconnecting with the girls she left behind when Jungin attempted to reach out. Whether Jiyoon ignored her or simply didn't hear her isn't clear, but Jungin seemed to take it hard and ended up sulking afterward. The next few episodes had scenes interspersed with just the two of them, but Mnet's editing only added to the awkwardness, making the situation appear much worse than it likely was. Conveniently, Jiyoon and Jungin found themselves paired together for a vocal challenge, and the tension between them needing a resolution shouldn't interfere with the performance. They resolved their miscommunication as they reconciled, explained their sides of the story, and hugged it out, becoming friends again. I'm obviously skipping over a lot of details here, since I'm summarizing what is basically a 12-episode ordeal, but that's because I don't want to drag out a simple miscommunication, like Mnet did. However, all of this to explain probably one of the only highlights during the show. I was not exaggerating when I said this is probably one of the only drama-filled moments of the show, which was essentially built on two immature people unable to communicate the reason behind their decisions until necessary. But I do stand by the earlier sentiment that avoiding conflict is a double-edged sword. It's necessary at times to compromise and simply let things go, but there is such a thing as too much complacency. If groupmates never address rifts in their teamwork, then it will continue popping up, and, as is life's wont to do, at the most inopportune times. To think that people will never disagree or fight is naive at best. But to see them have hiccups in their relationships and resolve those conflicts is the best place to see a budding team.
I don't have really high hopes for Izna. No, that's like Aeswan. I don't want to compare it to Aeswan. It's like Izna is these nuts. Sorry, I didn't mean that. So my whole thing is like, in really close proximity to each other, I observed the debut of Mal. And even myself, I wasn't there at the initial launch, I'm not even gonna lie to you. But I was there hours later, and I was watching it, and I was like, oh my god, what is this? Like, I wasn't even mad at the verses. I feel like those are probably the best parts of the songs, but what the fuck are those choruses? What the fuck is this? Meow, 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 meow. Absolutely atrocious. Absolutely, I'm not gonna listen to that shit. Would you listen to that shit? I want to listen to that shit. I'm gonna listen to that shit. But it did bring like this really big concern. I was like, okay, like I'm not really that invested in Meow. I know Meow. It's Meow. I know a lot of people were, but I wasn't really. But I am invested in this other group that's under the black label, which is called Izna, and I have no idea what to anticipate from them based on this debut. That's a lie. I know exactly what to anticipate from them, and that's more of this gold crush question mark image. I don't really know if I would call it girl crush. I think it's the fact that I'm drunk right now. I can't really put a name on it, but I would say that I'm really scared that they're gonna follow the footsteps in this kind of lackluster debut, because that's what it was. Meow's debut was lackluster. Like, yes, it had a few catchy moments here and there. Oui, bonjour, coma. But yeah, I'm really concerned about Meow's debut, because, like, what am I even allowed to expect from this release? I don't know. Am I expected to release, like, another of Teddy's, like, last lackluster tracks that were, like, really representative of Meow's whole debut? Like, am I just gonna get another Baby Monsters or Blackpink's rejects when it comes to this group? Because I'm not even gonna lie to you, I'm invested in this group. I am. I wish it wasn't the case. I wish I could say, like, oh, I'm better than all of this. I didn't watch a survival show and immediately get, enthralled into a specific member's lore, and I'm not, like, super invested in this member becoming successful or anything. I wonder if any of this is even going to be coherent. Like, I have these moments of coherence between, like, the noise, and then I think back to what I just said, and I was like, that made no fucking sense. How am I gonna, even kind of reconcile this with all the people that I've sent this to? Like, are you, even as a person, going to understand what the fuck I said about any of this? Probably not, but I think that Izna, as a consequence, under the black label, is going to be victim to another debut that's going to be, like, super lackluster. Like, okay, yeah, it's a bop by a technicality because it copies, like, the formula of all other YG songs, but, like, based on originality, based on innovation, based on, like, becoming a staple for their fucking fifth generation by this point, it fails completely.
It's hard not to feel concerned about Izna's debut, especially with the black label's involvement. Teddy, the producer synonymous with much of YG's Entertainment's music, has definitely carved out a lane for himself in the industry. His work often follows a rigid formula: verse, chorus, dance break. Sure, it's been successful for groups like Blackpink, Treasure, and Baby Monster, but at the cost of variety. The themes also tend to circle around the same ideas: having more money than the people listening to their music, ignoring the haters before they frankly even have any, and being attractive. The release of Meow's latest single didn't help Teddy's reputation either.
Hey y'all. Sorry for the sudden robot voice. Don't worry, it'll switch back in a moment. I don't have the time to record while editing this, and I just realized that I didn't specify what exact role Teddy has in all of this. Yes, he has produced YG music, but he didn't actually make Meow. Yet one of the producers that did work on it, 24, has also crafted or at least been involved with cultivating the Teddy-esque formula. Regardless, being a subsidiary under YG, and founded by Teddy himself, the black label that the show repeatedly bragged about making Isna's music, has a lot of power when it comes to creative direction and image. Just wanted to clarify that.
It's been dismissed as yet another cookie-cutter track mass-produced from the same old template, only this time with the added distinction that it wasn't particularly well received. This is where my worry for Izna kicks in. Throughout Island 2, Teddy's involvement in the future direction of the group's music was heavily emphasized, which doesn't give me any added confidence for their success. My fear is that they'll debut with a song that suffers from the same criticisms: formulaic, predictable, and worst of all, uninspiring. But tragically, without the financial backing that YG groups benefit from in the form of promotion, since they're officially under Wake 1. So there is a serious risk that they'll debut with a mediocre song without the monetarily generated hype to compensate. I'll admit, I'm biased here. So now I'm just nervously waiting for whatever they choose to debut with invested in their future. I know, I broke the unspoken rule of standing a group formed through a survival show. But to be fair, Jihyo was on the show, so what the fuck was I supposed to do? Izna was originally scheduled to make their first group appearance at KCON LA on July 28, 2024, but due to unforeseen visa complications, the performance was cancelled. Their debut stage will now take place on September 28, 2024 at KCON Germany. This is the event that will, hopefully, give us the insight we need to their artistic direction. I don't know if they'll preview a song that's a part of their debut, or if they'll simply do a 7-member version of a song on Island 2. But either way, it'll be a good measure of their online synergy and charisma, and hopefully their upcoming music. Okay, so editing wireshred popping in right now just to give my first impression of the KCON Germany stage. Because obviously when I had the first version of this video drafted, I hadn't actually seen the stage yet. I think it was like maybe a week or so away, from arriving here, but now it's here. And frankly, this video took a lot longer to edit than I was anticipating, so I thought for sure I was going to have this out before the 28th. That did not end up happening. I honestly don't know when it'll be up. Maybe I'll have like a surge of productivity and get it out before October, I don't know. But I should have known that since I've never really made a video this long, that it would inevitably take longer. All in all, I pretty much overestimated myself. Anyway, so the first impressions that I had of the stage. First things first, I was pretty much on the money when I said that they were going to be doing the, 7-member versions of songs that they featured on Island 2. That included Drip, Fake It, Lovesick Girls, which was interesting to see, and then I Will Always Love You. Now, surprising even myself, this stage actually made me more optimistic for the future. I know, it's like the first time I'm not such a Debbie Downer. But the vibe and the direction that I hoped they were going for is kind of where they seem to be headed right now. And while these songs are like still categorically, Teddy material, don't get me wrong, they're not like anything brazen or out of the gate for him, I can confidently say that these songs aren't like super girl crush oriented, with maybe the exception of Drip. Even a song by Lovesick Girls, which was kind of like a softer image for Blackpink. And again, they featured this version on Island 2, and they did it on the stage now. But they seem to be going for this kind of softer energy, and I'm kind of living for it. When it comes to the members themselves, I think they did pretty well for their first stage. I didn't see any like huge mistakes that like would be red flags. Now, that being said, they weren't spectacular either, but you could attribute that to a lot of things. It could be nervousness. Like I said, this is their first time on the stage as a group. While they have been training for this, it's going to take some time for them to like really grow into their shoes and feel comfortable in the spotlight. But nothing about the performance was like super off-putting for me. So again, all around, I'm feeling pretty hopeful. I really hope that I won't regret this. Anyway, yeah, I guess that's going to be the note that I leave this video on. I hope it goes without saying, but I hope you enjoyed this video. I had to cut a lot of stuff out. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I hope y'all feel grateful for me, because I had to do a lot of editing and cutting around stuff to make this video like even as half decent as it is right now. And even in this state, in its current version, I'm not 100% happy with. But I am also confident in the fact that this is probably the best it's going to get. And if you kind of want an idea of like what the full scope of this was, the entire rant after I compiled all of like the separate clips together added up to like 40 minutes of just straight talking. Like with all inhibition gone from my mind, I just kept rambling for 40 minutes straight. I didn't even know I was capable of doing that, and my entire shtick on this channel is me not being able to shut the fuck up. But also, usually I have a script when I do this kind of thing, right? I hope y'all don't think that I'm like nearly that poised just off the cuff. But yeah, I enjoyed this video. There's probably not going to be a part 2. I don't want to make a habit out of appearing drunk on my channel, but I was like, I'll throw one on there, to show people that I'm not too uptight all the time. But yeah, it was kind of experimental for me, this kind of video on my channel. I hope I do more like it. Not drunk, by the way, that's not what I mean. I do like drinking, but I'm a responsible drinker, okay? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I definitely did. Please leave your, opinions in the comments below, especially on a video like this. I would love to see them. And yeah, if anyone took this too seriously, I probably should have put this in the beginning of the video, shouldn't I? Yeah, I probably should have. Well, I'm gonna leave it here anyway. Please don't take any of my ramblings and the drunken sections too seriously. This is really just meant for goofs and gaffs, and then a little bit of formulated thoughts here and there. And that will be all from me for now. See y'all next time. Bye-bye!